टोरंटो 360 टेलीविज़न पे आपको खुशामदीद। आज फिर मौजूद हैं हम मेंबर पार्लियामेंट इकरा खालिद साहिबा के ऑफ़िस में और फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर मोर्नो आज स्पेशली इनकी दावत पे आए हैं। कम्युनिटी से कुछ क्वेश्चंस वो देखना चाहेंगे और हम भी चाहेंगे कि क्या कैनेडियन पॉलिसी है और इस कॉन्स्टिट्यूंसी के लिए ख़ास तौर पे कैनेडियन गवर्नमेंट क्या कर रही है। इकरा खालिद साहब हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं, खुशामदीद कहेंगे। अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
Walaikum salam, Arshad bhai. It's a pleasure as always to have you in our office.
नहीं, आप हमेशा मिनिस्टर्स आते हैं, ये बड़ी अच्छी रवायत है और आप बड़ा इस हवाले से काम करें। पहले तो आपको मुबारकबाद और आज के प्रोग्राम के हवाले से कुछ बताइए।
नहीं बिल्कुल मैं हमेशा ये कहती हूँ कि मेरा जो जॉब है एज अ मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट इन मिसिसागा एरन मिल्स इज़ टू मेक श्योर दैट कि मैं कम्युनिटी की आवाज़ ऊपर ऑटोवा में हमारी गवर्नमेंट में पहुँचा रही हूँ। एंड दिस इज़ जस्ट वन ऑफ दोज अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ फॉर द कम्युनिटी फॉर द पाकिस्तानी मीडिया स्पेशली टू शेयर देयर इश्यूज एंड देयर concerns with the finance minister. Our economy is doing really well. We've had steady growth and will continue to have steady growth, really low unemployment rates. We've created over 600,000 new jobs in the past 2 years. And I think that these are good news stories that we must share. But obviously we are faced with challenges as well. And we'd love to hear from the community what those challenges are so that we can really include that in our fall economic statement as well as budget 2019.
कुछ स्पेशली कॉन्स्टिट्यूंसी के लिए आपके लिए कुछ स्पेशल गवर्नमेंट कर रही है जो बताना चाहें?
Well, we've had about $8 million that's already been invested into Mississauga under the Canada Summer Jobs Program, under infrastructure funding. Abhi South Common ki jo revitalization hui hai, that was federal government funding of $250,000 to really help revitalize South Common Community Center. This is just where I've grown up in as well. There's lots and lots of investments that are happening, and then there's the indirect flow, like Jessica Canada Child Benefit. There's more money in the pocket of Canadians. Canadians have better spending power, and that really kickstarts the economy. And I think that we've seen a very positive result of this economic plan with the state of the economy as it is right now.
चलें, अभी 2 साल हैं, बल्कि 1 साल है, तो होपफुली एवरीथिंग बी गुड और अच्छा इलेक्शन आपके लिए हो नेक्स्ट।
Thank you बहुत।
अभी मिनिस्टर यहाँ आएंगे और उनसे कुछ बात करेंगे, कुछ मीडिया से वो गुफ्तगू करेंगे और इस प्रोग्राम को आगे बढ़ाएंगे। स्टे ट्यून्ड।
Lower taxes on middle-class Canadians. We significantly changed the way we deliver child benefit, which delivered a very different situation for families, improved the amount of money they were getting to raise their children. And as a result, our economy really picked up. We had more disposable income for people. They put it back in the economy. 2017 was a very strong year for Canada. We had the highest growth rate among G7 countries at 3%. And importantly, we really reduced the amount of unemployment. So we got ourselves down to really now where we are about 6% unemployment, a significant advantage. And at the same time, because of the Canada Child Benefit, raised 300,000 children out of poverty. So a very different situation now. We know there's always more to do, and that's why I'm out listening to people, because we want to make sure that we continue to ensure that we have policies that will allow investments that will create jobs, good jobs for Canadians, and good jobs for Canadian families. So with that, I'll stop. I'm sure you have questions on that or on other issues, and I'm happy to talk to you.
If I can, I will ask for people to ask questions one at a time. And I'll start with Nadeem bhai, if you want to go first.
Yeah, so please, comment about the situation between Saudi Arabia and Canada, and how it impacts on the students, Saudi students studying here. If they go back, how you're going to cope up the situation?
I have the same question. I add something in that the issue should be, I think, tackled through the backdoor channel diplomacy. It should be openly when a ambassador is talking in front of different people. So, and also I think these Canadian, Saudi students, I think they $400 million they're spending on students, Saudi government. So what's your comments on that?
Well, first of all, let me just acknowledge that it's a challenging situation we find ourselves in. As a government and as a country, we will always stand up for human rights in Canada and around the world. This is nothing new. We recognize that the actions taken by Saudi Arabia will cause some challenges, and we are in an evolving situation where some decisions have been taken very recently. I can't comment on the exact nature of the challenges that will be faced by students. We haven't seen all the details yet. But what I can say is we do have a strong economy. We recognize that we are in a positive economic situation. We do know that it's always important to have strong relationships with countries around the world, including Saudi Arabia. And of course, we want to work through this challenge in a way that is constructive.
There is a trade tension between US and Canada. Do you think that is there any threat for Canadian economy regarding the housing sector?
Let me take that really as two separate issues. So the housing sector in Canada is one that's had a positive impact on our economy, but also we found ourselves in a situation where a couple of our housing markets, Toronto and Vancouver in particular, were finding themselves escalating at, frankly, an unsustainable rate. So the actions we've taken since coming into office, as well as the actions taken by OSFI this year, have led to a gradual reduction in the rate of price escalation. We think that this is positive for the overall economy. The fact that Canadians are highly indebted is obviously an economic challenge, and one that we're trying to encourage people to manage. The housing changes have been positive in that regard. I would say that's an important issue and one we continue to monitor. With respect to our relationships with the United States, the other part of your question, we're actively working on trying to get to an improved NAFTA. We've had clearly a long period of discussions. We believe that now there's the potential for us to continue those discussions, and we're cautiously optimistic that we can make some real traction in those discussions in the coming weeks and months.
Yes, this year the economy is growing approximately 2.3%, which is followed by the US. US is growing 2.7%. And next year projection is 1.7 to 1.8. And next year is the election year as well. Do you think the federal Liberal government could be any problem because of the slowness in the economy growth?
I think it's important to start with where we found ourselves. So we've seen strong growth. I think you're correct in assessing that the rate of growth that we project in the Canadian economy in 2018 and in 2019 is around the 2% mark. That growth will, we hope, continue to sustain positive jobs across the country. And of course, from our perspective, what we're going to do is continue to try and make the kinds of investments that will make a difference. The infrastructure investments we committed to over 10 years are starting to have significant traction on the economy. The kinds of investments we made in budget 2017 and 18 in science and innovation will have a positive impact on the economy. So I will tell you that I'm looking at an economy that is performing well, one that's creating strong jobs. I think that is what Canadians look to when they think about their government. They want to know that they're in a positive situation for themselves and their families. I think that's where we find ourselves now, and we're committed to trying to continue that.
Most Canadians are focusing on NAFTA, and they are concerned as well. What do you think that this issue will be resolved, or will it be good for our economy or whatever?
We see NAFTA as an agreement that's been positive for our economy over the last decades. We believe there's opportunity to improve NAFTA. The discussions going on right now between the United States and Mexico are important as a way for us to get to an improved agreement. I had the opportunity to go to Mexico City a couple of weeks ago to talk with the previous administration and the new administration, which is coming into office in December, and had the sense that they were seriously interested in moving forward on a renewed NAFTA. That gives me some level of optimism that they will get to an agreement. And at that stage, our hope is that we can get back to the table and find a way to get to an agreement that makes sense for all of our economies. We do know that the only agreement that we're going to sign is one that's positive for Canadians. After all, that's our core interest. So there'll be some things that we need to make sure support that kind of agreement. Things like ensuring the trade deal can go on for a long period of time, making sure there's a way to resolve disputes between our countries. These are important issues. We know that we're going to come to the table with creative ideas on how to make sure that those move forward. And that's the reason I look forward to these continued discussions.
Thank you.
And my question is a little bit different. As you know, the government has opened the border for the refugees. So there are a lot of refugees are continuously coming. So what do you think that it will affect on the taxes for the public, or what do you think about that? Because it's, of course, there's a burden on public also.
I always think it's important to put this kind of question in context. So we're a country that's open to immigration. Immigration's been enormously positive for our country. We've built a strong economy. We continue to seek to bring new immigrants into our country because they add value to our economy. They add a cultural flavor, and it's a positive dynamic. So we'll continue to do that. The context that we find ourselves in right now is we've decided to increase immigration. The refugee part of that immigration is largely consistent with what we've seen over the years. The changes are not that significant in terms of overall numbers. We acknowledge that there have been some people coming to the borders seeking asylum. We've also put some funding in place to make sure that we can actually deal with that, deal with the challenges, for example, in the city of Toronto. But I do think it's important to put it in context. Canada, in the terms of the global acceptance of refugees, is not that significant. There's a very significant refugee challenge in many countries in the world. Canada, we've been positive to try and accept refugees who've been also positive in our economy. We'll continue to take that approach to being open, but to make sure that we have a process that allows people to come in appropriately, and that's what we're working through now.
Rana?
Minister, real estate market is playing an important role in the economy, but in the last few months we have seen that there are unnecessary stress tests like these years taken by the government. The market is very slow. Do you think that it affects the economy?
Whenever any sort of change in a particular sector happens, of course it will have some economic impact. So we realize that a series of policies that are intended to make sure that that economy is stable and protects people's investments will have some economic drag. That was something that we expected as we came out with these policies. What we believe is that it's really important to protect people's investments in their real estate sector, to make sure that we have an affordable opportunity for people to get into buying homes. That's what we're trying to engineer, and do that in a way that creates, a stable economy, not one that creates undue risks, which of course is the possibility if the market is in any way moving beyond a sustainable growth rate. So I think we're in a place that is largely what we expected right now. We're seeing some moderation in the markets, and I think long term that's healthy for our country.
My supplementary question with regard to this one is, do you think it is better to put measures against the builders rather than first-time buyers?
Sorry.
Because the builders are the people who are increasing the prices.
I think we want to be sure that the decisions we're taking are appropriately targeted. So the kinds of decisions we took to make sure that people had adequate coverage for their mortgages by having a stress test was recognizing that there were some finding themselves with too large a mortgage, especially in light of the likelihood of interest rates going up. We are in a situation where we've seen interest rates go up. Recently, as you saw, the Bank of Canada increased interest rates by 25 basis points. I think in that context, we want to protect Canadians by having those stress tests. That's the reason we did that. The decisions by the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions to broaden the impact of those stress tests, we think is having an impact that will actually protect Canadians from taking decisions that could put them under significant strain in a changing economy.
Mr. Minister, I will take you back to September 2015. Then the leader of the Liberal Party and all the Right Honourable Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he made a promise that we will be making changes into the home buyer program. And that is one of the promises which you have not done anything, and one more budget is left. The conservative government at that time said we're going to increase the limit from 25,000 to 35,000. And Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, said we're going to give you another second withdrawal from your RRSP into your home buy plan. Nothing has been done on this. Why there's a delay and what are the plans to accomplish that?
What we've tried to do in the housing market is to make sure that the decisions we've taken are appropriate for the market situation we find ourselves in. So what we've seen is that the Canadian real estate market is really not one market. It's a series of different markets. And the tools that the federal government has are really national tools. So anything that we do has to be applied nationally. We don't want to take actions that would serve to actually create greater risks in some markets in order to put ourselves in a situation where there's positive impacts in some places. We not only improve the market, but we do no harm by taking policies that could actually make people more vulnerable.
So you think something will be coming up in the next budget?
I'm in the midst of thinking about our fall economic statement, and then we'll be thinking about our 2019 budget, and I don't have anything to announce about our budget today.
Are we looking some balanced budget this year?
We've really found ourselves in a situation where what we're trying to do is to make sure that we maintain what I would call the very strong economic position that Canada's in. So we have the lowest level of debt as a function of our GDP of G7 countries, and that's an important thing to continue. So we've been reducing the amount of debt as a function of our GDP with each one of our budgets because we want to make sure that we're resilient in the case of any economic challenges. That's the frame that I take as we try to manage that. So we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to make investments in Canadians, which I think they expect, but do it in a way that allows us to reduce our debt as a function of GDP.
And that brings me to a question. As you said that economically we are doing well. So these audios of Roger Foley that just came out, they are very, very disturbing.
These, sorry?
The guy who was offered medically assisted death in London, Ontario, in London hospital. Instead of I think a couple of years ago it was made legal that the patients who are chronically ill or cannot do well, they will be offered medically assisted death option. But they won't be offered, but they have the option. They can choose to. But in this case, he was offered instead of, he wanted to live, but he's still there and he's fighting. There's a landmark lawsuit in the process. So if we are doing economically well, why we are given the option at that point in life of death over life?
Sure.
So I sit on the Justice Committee in Ottawa, and we studied this issue at great length. You may know that this decision really came from the Supreme Court of Canada, and there were some really stringent restrictions that were put on who is able to consent, who is able to actually go through with this. You have to consent at a number of different times, and the reason why this was offered is because the Supreme Court said that it is your right, it is a human right, basically, to end your suffering if that is what you are feeling. And we heard testimony from hundreds of Canadians, heart-wrenching testimony about how much they were suffering and how much they wanted that option to be there should they choose to take it. I don't think it has anything to do with lowering costs in anything. It is really about that individual's right to end their suffering should they want to do it, but with really strict checks to make sure that nobody's being forced into something.
Yeah, so I think there's a lawsuit in the process, and the guy was actually offered. It was supposed to come from him. Right? And I think over 2,000 deaths that have happened since the ruling came, and there was nothing wrong with that because that was all initiated by the patient.
Right, and the checks and measures that are put on it, for sure.
Business community is asking cutting Canada corporate taxes. Is there any plan for doing this?
So I'm out listening to Canadian businesses. I think they're focused on the differences between the Canadian tax system and the U.S. tax system. As you probably know, the Canadian tax rates have been significantly lower than the U.S. corporate tax rates. What the U.S. changes did was they closed that gap, so our tax rates now, from a corporate standpoint, are largely similar. But we retain advantages. So we retain advantages in what they call the marginal effective tax rate. So basically what that means is for the next investment that a Canadian business is going to make, they still have an advantage over an investment in the United States. What I'm hearing from businesses, they want to maintain and even increase that advantage by considering, as was the case in the U.S. tax changes, accelerated depreciation of capital investments so that they can actually get a tax break early from making investments. We're hearing from businesses that they're wanting to understand other aspects of the tax code changes that the U.S. has made to make sure that we stay competitive. So right now we're listening. I will tell you that our intent is to remain competitive. We've been competitive. We want to remain competitive, and that's certainly an objective as we hear what the different issues are from a geography and a sector by sector basis, because they are different for different businesses.
So we're going to take two more questions, and he's
Yeah.
going to go around and say hello to
The
you.
gentleman in the back wanted a question.
Yeah, so first of all, I mean, on behalf of everybody, thank you so much for taking the time and speaking with us, and I hope everybody agrees. I have a feedback.
I hope
and-
so, but if
I
not.
hope, I'm just saying it, I hope everybody agrees.
I think
Looks like they are.
we don't have
You'll have it twice now then. So I have a feedback and a question. So feedback I have is from the active communication perspective. So in my interaction with ordinary Canadians, you guys are three years into this caretaker, or maybe in the government, and 2019 is the election year. When I ask any individual Canadian, what are the top 1 or 3 things that this government has done to positively impact your life, they're clueless, right? I'm not talking on behalf of everybody. I'm talking on behalf of people who I speak with. So just a piece of feedback and suggestion. I don't know, I mean, how you want to classify international level, national level, and individual level. So if somebody asks me, I should say, yep, I'm proud of this government because they've done A, B, C, right? So this is something which in the conversation missing. Question I have is, this is your 3rd year, finishing 3rd year. What is that one thing that you've not been able to accomplish, and why? From your ministry perspective.
My main focus is clearly on ensuring that Canadian families are doing better, that middle-class Canadians feel themselves to be in a better situation as a result of our government. We've made significant traction. So we've significantly changed, in particular, as I mentioned at the outset, the child benefit system that has a broad and important impact on Canadian families. 9 out of 10 Canadian families are significantly better off. But I acknowledge your comment. I think what people are always thinking about is the future. So as you say that we've made some changes that impact people, the question, and the legitimate question is, what's going to happen tomorrow that's going to give me more confidence that my family, my children are going to be better off? So as we look towards the future, we're thinking about how can we ensure, in my situation, how do we ensure that business investment stays strong? We know that in order for good jobs to be there, businesses need to make investments to grow their business. And that's a whole host of things that we need to do well. We need to think about NAFTA working so that people have appropriate tariffs. We need to think about the tax rates so people can make investments with the appropriate tax rates. We need to think about training and skills training in particular so that we have the talent available for businesses to actually be successful. So I don't have the luxury of having only one thing. As the Minister of Finance, we need to think about how all those things interact to actually generate a positive economic outcome. I think our important goal over the next year will be communicating to people how well we're doing as compared to how we were doing a few years ago. And the reality is clearly there. Our economy is doing better. Our amount of growth has gone up. The wage growth that we're seeing now is positive. The challenge is there'll always be more to do. We'll always need to do better. And I'm up for the challenge. The communications challenge, though, is real.
Yeah, Minister, how you see this? You know that Mexico and US is going in an agreement with NAFTA. Not yet, but I think they're going to sign. But the thing is that as far as the Canada and US relation is concerned, just in regards to NAFTA, what do you think, how it impact on the auto industry?
First, what's going on right now is the U.S. and Mexico are working together on important aspects of the NAFTA deal, which is a three-way deal that are mainly between the U.S. and Mexico. Once they resolve some important issues, and some of them will, as you mentioned, impact the auto sector, I think that'll be the appropriate time for the three of us to get back to the table. So that's the process that we're going through right now. In terms of the auto sector, I think what we're trying to get to is an agreement that makes sense for all three countries. The main issue on the table is thinking about rules of origin, so where cars are actually built in North America to make sure that there's an appropriate representation in Mexico, United States, and in Canada. I'm cautiously optimistic that we're making progress, and that would be positive for Ontario because, in particular, of the auto sector. Pakistan is no exception. We can see that there's opportunities for us improving that trading relationship, and our goal broadly will be to be thinking about how we can enhance our trading relationship around the world, think about small current relationships and how we can enhance that. Any ideas you have, we'd be all ears.
Sure.
Thank you.
That's it for questions.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out today and for your questions. Really, thank you, Minister, for being here and for listening and for really taking part in a listening tour across the country. I think that as elected officials, that is really what our job is to do, is to get that message from the grassroots of Canada up to really see how we can take those ideas and build a stronger and a better country. All of these great folks are a good part of the Pakistani-Canadian community here within Canada, of the media specifically. And a lot of the issues that they have talked about today are issues that they hear as well. And a little bit about Mississauga Erin Mills. I think it is the best riding in Canada. It's one of the most educated ridings in the country as well. About 75% of people here have a post-secondary education. Great people that live here, and I really want to thank you for the great work that you're doing in empowering Canadians. Ultimately, I think Canada is strong enough, and the people and Canadians are strong enough to really boost themselves. They just need that foundation, and things like the Canada Child Benefit, things like creating jobs, 600,000 jobs over the past 2 years, that really helps people in building their lives and really taking that boost and running with it. And that's really what I'm hearing at the doors. So thank you very much for all of your hard work, and thank you for being here today. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
When the Prime Minister went to India, they had not that much response from them, and also with the China. So is Canada looking for the other options for the other countries for the trade?
I think we're making progress in all the day-to-day challenges. It's going in a positive direction. With China, we continue to want to have a strong relationship. I'm, in my role, leading the economic and financial strategic dialogue. So we continue to think about how we can improve our relationship with China, recognizing that's a long-term objective. Similarly with India, we see that the vast opportunity for improved trade, but also know that we need to develop that over time. So really that context is important with respect to your final question. We do see the importance of diversifying trade with all other countries around the world, and that is something that my colleague, Minister Jim Carr, is focused on. So that we know is important for Canadian businesses as they try to expand trade, and we'll continue to be focused on that.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
मिसागा में हम हमारे मेंबर पार्लियामेंट इकरा खालिद साहबा के ऑफिस के सामने मौजूद हैं। थोड़ी ही देर पहले यहाँ पे फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर मोर्नो यहाँ मौजूद थे। उन्होंने पाकिस्तानी मीडिया के साथ गुफ्तगू की, सवालों के जवाब दिए, कैनेडियन पॉलिसीज़ के हवाले से बात की, और ख़ास तौर पे जो सऊदी अरब और कनाडा के दरमियान आजकल एक मामला टेंशन चल रही है, उस हवाले से भी उन्होंने बात की। और बहुत अच्छा इस हवाले से कंट्रीब्यूशन जो हमारी मेंबर पार्लियामेंट इकरा खालिद साहबा का उनका है कि वो जनरली मिनिस्टर्स हों या दूसरे अहम अहदेदार हों उनको अपने ऑफिस में बुलाते हैं, मीडिया से भी जो है उनका इंटरेक्शन होता है और बाकी लोगों के साथ भी इंटरेक्शन होता है, और यकीनन ये बहुत अच्छी बात है। हमारी कम्युनिटी के हवाले से उनको बात करने का मौका मिलता है और इसी तरह से जो गवर्नमेंट की पॉलिसीज़ हैं वो मीडिया तक जो है डायरेक्टली पहुंच जाती हैं। कैमरामैन साबिर गाय के साथ अरशद भट्टी को दीजिए इजाज़त। अल्लाह हाफिज़।
You're watching Toronto 360 TV. After the commercial break, we're coming right back. Don't go away.
आप देख रहे हैं टोरंटो 360 जो कनाडा का सबसे नंबर 1 चैनल है। अभी हम आएंगे वक्फे के बाद, जाइएगा नहीं, चाय पीते रहिएगा और हमें देखते रहिएगा। थैंक यू।
Keep watching Toronto 360 TV.
We'll be back after this. For these messages.